Right, behold, a really special moment in British sports car history. This is the Exige 390 Sport Final Edition. And it really is a final edition. That they're not planning on making any more variations of this car. This really is, we're stood in front of the tail end, the swan song, the final chapter of the incredible driver's car that is the Lotus Exige. And in a minute, and I think appropriately, as far as sign-offs go, we're going to take this car for its final drive, where it's been developed and test driven over the last 20 years. Yeah, this car, this platform is 20 years old. I cannot believe it. So in a minute, we're going to take it for its first drive on the famous Hethel racetrack or development circuit. But first of all, let's just point out a few things. So, 397 horsepower. Now, I know in the world of modern day sports cars, that doesn't sound like a big deal, but the important thing, and one of the signature features of a Lotus, is of course the weight. So combined with a weight of just under 1,140 kilograms, you get a brake horsepower per ton of 390 horsepower. But importantly, that power to weight results in 349 brake horsepower per ton, which translates to not hanging around. And that's the beauty of the Lotus. It doesn't have to be bonkers horsepower to be an engaging drive. Super lightweight. You'll notice there's some pretty posh AP racing brakes on here. We've got the Michelin Pilot Sport 4S. It's important to mention that even though this is the last of the line, unlike a lot of manufacturers when they do the final edition, they can sometimes be super hardcore and like almost overly harsh. But with this, it is still more of a road bias version of the Exige. And at £79,000, yes, no small change, but if you think about this compared to the 430 Cup, for example, which goes into the six figures, this thing, dare I say it, could just be the sweet spot of the range. And so here it is, the 3.5 litre V6 supercharged engine. Unlike a lot of manufacturers that do the final editions of a car, where they're typically the most hardcore, the most stripped out, the most intense versions, this interestingly sits sort of under the 430 Cup, under the 420, and is a little bit more of a sort of road bias experience. And actually, having had the luck of experiencing the 420 out on the road, it's fantastic, but you do get that sense that it is perhaps a little bit compromised in terms of road experience and might be better suited on the track. But with this, there's a little bit more luxury about it. I think this is probably a more applicable road proposition from the Exige, which I think is brilliant. Normally, they just go way over the top, super hardcore and stripped out, but this you'll actually be able to enjoy. And it's important to say that this really is the final show. There is no more editions after this. This is the last one. Ultimately, I'm not sure if these are all sold, but at the price point of 79,000, sure, it's steep, but if you compare that with the 430 Cup, which goes into six figures, this might just be the sweet spot. So, take a good look at the glossy, sexy B-roll, and then the important thing is, and that's what these things are all about, is the drive. So we're going to hop in, tune you into this wonderfully supercharged V6, and find out what the last run, the final hurrah of the Exige is all about. Now, by and large, interior, pretty much the same. There are some upgraded trim details, lovely seats, contrasting stitching, central lined panel of Alcantara there, very cool. However, the big upgrade is the addition of an all-new LCD display in front of you, which now comes as standard on both the Exige Final Edition and the Elise Final Edition. And what is quite a nice touch is when you swap between sport and race mode, the panel changes to display and change depending on the driver mode you're in. Oh, and by the way, 0 to 60 in 3.7 seconds, good for 172 miles an hour, and it's fitted with some pretty trick Bilstein adjustable suspension. Okay, so here we go. Now this actually is a moment in itself. Being on Lotus's own Hethel test track is the equivalent of the sort of British Fiorano, really. you've got to think of the cars which have been developed here over the years. And speaking of over the years, this car is 20 years old. Not this exact one, obviously this is the final edition, but the Exige as a platform, 20 years old. To me it feels so fresh. So today is somewhat of it might not seem a big deal, but honestly, this is one of those moments that I know I'm going to look back on long after I'm done with YouTube and filming cars and be like, yep, I drove the final edition Exige around Lotus's very own test track. I mean, it's a really big deal because this car, as far as iconic British sports cars go, is as iconic as it gets. Listen to it. Now, honestly, you can drive modern day organic sports cars all you want, but despite the fact that this is registered as a 2021 road car, ultimately, as I mentioned, it is based around a 20-year-old platform. And there are some things which are just proven in time, as Lotus have been doing for some time now, which is less weight, better driving dynamics, and with this car, you know, a little bit more power, but it's not about that. It's about driving character, driving engagement, and listen to this V6. It's just a wonderful thing. And small details, which for the driver is a big detail, which is pedal placement for rev matching. I've been in some modern day cars recently where they are supposedly drivers' cars, and then the pedal placement's miles away, and they've got like auto rev matching and all the things that a driver doesn't really want. It's a really strange thing, but once again, it's not necessarily any fault of the manufacturer. It's consumer demands and implications from various forms of regulation and safety things that are making cars heavier. I mean, this is a rare car to have no power steering. Think about that. Never mind hydraulically assisted, no power steering. So when I talk about organic car and steering feel, I mean, this thing takes it to an entirely different level for a car which is registered as a new car in this day and age. It's quite remarkable, actually. Yeah, what a thing. And then there's the other thing, the lack of weight, the lack of inertia through corners. Under direction change, like this, like this. The whole thing is alive and alert, and because there's very little weight, the direction change and transition between corners, the S's up here, feel amazing. And then of course, because of the car's complete lack of weight, I mean look, we're like 1,100 I don't know, just over 1,150 kilograms here, and that translates to remarkable braking ability. And it means that when you're on it, the tires don't drop off so quickly. The brakes don't fade around continuous swift laps, because all of the inertia, all of that weight that we now are basically familiar with in new cars simply isn't here. So when you look at it and you look at the brakes by modern day standards are quite small, it's not because they're small, it's because it doesn't need it. It doesn't need massive 10 piston carbon ceramic brakes to scrub off the speed, because it's not that heavy. And I think what is very reassuring to hear when I'm speaking to Lotus about the future of the brand is that yes, they're developing a 2,000 horsepower electric hypercar in the Avaya. However, the Emira is but a few months away. And speaking with Gavin Kershaw, the ninja dynamicist, as it were, of Lotus, who has put his heart and soul into developing the chassis dynamics and handling characteristics over the years, the fundamental ethos and core beliefs of what make Lotus a Lotus is going to filter through into the new Emira, and that for me excites me greatly and fills me with, quite frankly, a bit of hope, because I did wonder where it was going for Lotus when they announced a 2,000 horsepower electric car, which for no fault of their own is, I think it's at 1,800 kilograms. Now in the world of electric cars, 1,800 kilograms actually isn't that bad at all. But for in the world of Lotus, 1,800 kilograms is like an HGV. Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo! Oh, that brakes, seriously. The brakes, I love it. APs shedding off just over a ton's worth of weight. Feels good. And there's that understeer, which is safe when you want it, and you can just as easily go into oversteer when you want it and just dial it out. And this is why these chassis, these cars, they've been such a benchmark for handling. You'll find if a brand is developing a sports car, the chances are they'll get their hands on a Lotus at some point. It's a benchmark reference for how a little sports car should handle. And it only takes a few laps to understand why. What a little thing, and what a way to say goodbye. And I will just slow this down at this point because I don't want to get overly philosophical and emotional, but this really is the end of quite a substantial era. I can't tell you the influence that this car has had on the industry. It's been incredibly important for Lotus as a brand. It's been a very successful car for them. But just going back to the importance of purity when it comes to a driver's car, and the fact that you can still buy a car of this distilled nature in 2021, when all the world's talking about right now is EVs and more weight, more power. It's not always needed from a distilled driving experience. In fact, I'd go so far as to say it isn't needed. And this is, and always has been, proof of that. It's less weight, more fun. And while it will put in a good lap time, the car isn't about lap times, it's about good times. And that's important, isn't it? If you're doing track days, if you're looking to pick apart a back road, a country road, and just glide over it with engagement, fun, and feedback, this thing is basically the ABC 1, 2, 3 of how to achieve that, how a car connects to your smile glands and pulls on them in every direction change. So, thank you, Lotus. Thank you, Exige. Goodbye. Farewell. And thank you for everything that you've given to the great British sports car industry. But I've got a funny feeling that its legacy will very much continue into the Emira. As always, thank you so much for watching, and we shall see you next time. Ciao!